Bible. And again, we're giggling.
Every single time.
Two amateurs trying our best here, but we got a special guest with us to talk about Measure 4. We've been plugging Measure 4 to get.
We want everybody to vote yes.
This is a yes, yes, yes deal on property tax elimination. We have with us today the author, Dr. Rick Becker, who is not only the chair of the committee, but he is the author of the bill, which is really brilliantly written. And so we're not going to say a whole lot.
I'm going to say thank you, Rick, for even bringing it up in the first place, but also just doing what you've been doing. So we really appreciate it.
And thank you for taking time today. I know that you've got a clinic to run.
We see him this direction and you are that direction.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm looking at Rick or not, but anyway, he can hear us. That's the main thing. We wanted to do a quick, it's 2 men in a Bible, so we always start with at least one Bible verse, and this one is the 10 Commandments, and it relates, believe it or not. And that is, I'm just going to read a few things. Most people are familiar with the 10 Commandments, but you've got things like, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. And the one I like especially for this is, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's house, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things point to the importance that God has on private property, personal property. And if it matters to God, it should matter to us as well. So this measure has to do with eliminating that property tax, but we really need to understand what the measure actually says. So Rick, thank you for being here. You go ahead and do your thing, Rick. Just share what's the bill about and why would anybody oppose something like this, which I think is
right.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I'll talk a little bit about it. Feel free to stop me at any point, ask questions or clarifications if that would be helpful. You mentioned that the bill or the measure is well written. I think it is, but the reason is that I had the benefit of looking at the measure from 2012, and then the Legislative Council and the legislature did an in-depth study. They had many documents, they had meetings. The lawyers looked at each tiny aspect of that measure from 2012. All of their commentary and documentation was right there for me to read and to then acknowledge that maybe there were some areas that should be improved from the 2012 measure, which then I improved. Where they identified things need to be fixed, I fixed. So it is not the 2012 measure, not to take anything away from that effort, but it is wholly different in that any of the opponents' concerns and allegations that may have been valid for the 2012 measure are no longer valid. Now they're repeating them. The opposition is the same group, the same people, the same organizations, the same chairman, the same name, and unfortunately the same fear campaign, which again does not apply to this measure. So very briefly,
it's so typical.
Yeah. So what this measure does, I think, is addresses what people's primary concerns are in the state with property tax. So we hate property tax. I don't think we mind paying for services that we need that come from our local governments, but we hate property tax. And so when I dig deep and say, why do we hate property tax so much? Well, number one, it relies on valuations. So when the value of our house goes up, even if we didn't do anything to it, the value of our house goes up because our neighborhood started developing more, we have to pay more tax. That doesn't make any sense. The valuations are done by people we don't elect, we don't know, they don't know our situation. And so a method of taxing that's done by people we don't elect, I don't like that either. So people are very disgruntled about valuations. Number two is people don't understand how property taxes work. And Jeff, I'll tell you, I don't think the majority of legislators know truly.
Right.
If you ask them to draw out, and I was guilty of this for years until I really dug in to understand property taxes. To ask them, look, tell me exactly, step by step, how we get from full and true value of my house to a mill levy. Very few people, almost no, is like 0.001% of North Dakotans might know, and maybe 15% of the legislature, if I'm being generous.
Right.
So it's crazy to me that one of the three methods of taxation, of the biggest methods of taxation, sales tax, income tax, property tax, one of those methods, we don't have any clue of how it works. That doesn't seem right.
We do know sales tax very easily. We can figure that out. We can figure out
Exactly.
income tax, but not this one.
Right. And
Right.
that's not right. The third thing that gets people up in arms is you can lose your home. The
Mhm.
immorality of the government being able to take something away that you own, and in fact, probably the most important thing that you own,
Mhm.
if you fall in hard times and are unable to pay property taxes for 2.5 years, is all they need before they start the foreclosure proceeding. Did you really ever own your property that you worked
Mhm.
your whole life
Mhm.
to buy, that maybe you're still paying off, or maybe it took you 30 years to pay off? Now they can come in when you fall on hard times and take that away. If you're on a
Yeah.
fixed income, but the neighborhood around you is developing like crazy, your taxes are going to go up. Can you afford to pay that?
Yeah.
So these are things that people hate about it, right? So we recognize at least these three things people dislike about property tax. I want to just hit one other thing that people complain about that this measure also addresses, that I think by and large, the vast majority of North Dakotans believe that the state is spending way beyond what it needs to spend.
That's
It
correct.
has a spending problem. The legislature spends like drunken sailors. We have been blessed with natural resources that provide so much revenue. The revenue per capita in North Dakota exceeds all of the other states.
Mm.
Oh,
And the increase in that revenue certainly. So we're looking at all of this revenue coming in, and the state is spending it like crazy. So I think, again, the vast majority of North Dakotans feel like the state is overspending. So here's what this measure does. Number one, it reforms the way locals do taxing. It reforms property taxes. A thumbs up comes up on my screen. Nice.
I love it. Was that
Let
you,
me try
Jason?
two. How does that work?
No,
No. Oh yeah, yeah.
there it is.
Okay. Um, that's goofy. So it completely reforms property taxes.
Right.
And what it does is say that this prohibits the any valuation based tax, any valuation based property tax on real or personal property. Now, that's already in the Constitution, and it's specifically to the
Mm.
state. The state may not levy a valuation
Mm.
based real or personal property tax.
Right.
So that's why it makes the most sense to put this measure in the Constitution as well.
Oh,
It's
sure.
that
Yeah.
statement is in the Constitution. All we're doing is saying neither the state nor any local subdivision may levy a valuation-based property
I don't
tax
think
on
people
real or
realize
personal
that
property.
I
that's
didn't.
already in
I
the
didn't know
Constitution
that either.
that the state cannot do that. Is that how they get around it
No.
then? They kind of pretend that, well, it's being done by the local?
It's being done by the locals. Now,
Yeah.
the the question that I'm not sure how we get around is the state actually does levy a 1 mil property tax that goes to the medical school.
Mm.
So the state actually, in my opinion, is going against the Constitution, but just for that 1 mil.
Right.
But so that's why when people say why in the Constitution, well, first off, if we didn't put it in the Constitution, the legislature would just change it. But
Right.
secondly, it's in that's where the meat of it is. It's in the Constitution. That's where if we're going to make a change, we need to make a constitutional change in the Constitution.
Yes.
So we are changing. So we're taking away, when you get away from valuation based property taxes, you get away from the concern about valuations. When you don't have valuation based property tax, you get away from mill levies.
Mm.
So we're getting away from not only the frustration of valuations, but the complete lack of understanding and lack of transparency for mill levies. And then third, while we're doing this, we have the ability then to do away with the possibility of the government taking away your home because you have a short period of falling on hard times. So this reforms that. What it does then, it doesn't take anything else away. It just takes that one means of taxing away
Right.
from the locals. Now, yes, it happens to be their major way, but it doesn't mean they can't do it a different way. So when we look
Mm.
at other ways they tax, because we're not saying these people say, oh, then they're just going to tax in a different way.
Mhm.
Yes, they are in a better way,
Mm.
in a way that's more transparent and more fair, and people
Mhm.
have more say on it because it's going to be brought up at city and county commission meetings with public input.
And no more
And
worrying about missing your home or losing your home.
exactly. When you understand it more, then you're more likely to be able to stand up for your rights. How
Mhm.
how can you
Mhm.
argue for your rights when you actually don't even understand the process? And,
Right.
and they wonder, well, why don't people come and say something?
But
Because they don't
the biggest
understand.
the biggest way to pay for all of this is the government, the legislature, I should say them. They're the ones that are foolishly spending money. There's plenty of money to
Hmm.
pay back
Mhm.
all of this missing
Yeah.
money, if you wish to call it that, from property tax.
Right. So again, the reform says, okay, locals, you just like the state can no longer do a valuation-based property tax. You're going to have to do other taxes and fees to cover the costs of what you want to do in your budget. So they're still in charge of their budget and they're in charge of raising the revenue they need. But here comes the other part where I was talking about where people are very frustrated with how much money the state is spending. We know the state is overspending by about $2.5 billion per year, not per biennium, per year.
Hmm.
And what the measure does, it says the state must replace to every political subdivision the amount they levied in 2024, which is the amount that you and I are paying in 2025. So that's addressing the spending, the overspending the state is doing, at least in part, and forcing them to give it back to the people of North
Right.
Dakota. Because
Yeah.
whatever you're
which is nice.
paying right now in property tax, you're going to keep that in your pocket,
Right.
not just next year, not just the year after, but every
Every
single
year.
year forever.
Yes.
Now,
It's a
so that's
huge
huge
figure.
relief that the state must give you, which then what we're doing is taking away the wasteful spending, the spending that they give to private businesses with corporate welfare and subsidies and all of that, all of the crazy, extreme, bloated government with agencies increasing their budget year after year after year to crazy amounts. We're doing that to give relief to the people of North Dakota. In the meantime, then the city and county governments and all of the local governments are going to be able to work out what's best for the people in their community on how they can tax or levy fees for future needs that are above the amount that the state replaces.
Okay.
That's the measure.
Right.
So, well, I like what you said on one of your Facebook lives, Rick, about, when you got these people out there with fear saying, well, you're going to lose your fire department services. You're going to lose your half of your school's going to
Your
go away, all this kind of
911
stuff.
services,
And you made the point that,
your
okay,
county
what they're
services,
really admitting is that all this waste, which counts up to the multi millions,
billions.
is that, oh, you're not going to cut that. And especially when a legislator
Right.
says it. That was really
Yeah.
good. I think that's a really
Two
good
and a
point.
half, $2.5 billion of wasteful spending, which is pretty big.
Well, and
And there's only, is it what, 1.3 billion per year?
Right.
and even if you cut that, I would dare say what's left over is we're still making the assumption that we need that, and that's where that comparison to South Dakota comes in. Uh, I don't know. I've always forget how much more. Why in the world, when we used to be, uh,
Similar to them.
whenever it was, we were always on track with South Dakota. Why?
Yes.
Because we're the same relative size,
Right.
and now we're
Yeah.
not.
Exactly. There's so you're exactly right. There is the aspect of the opposition, in large part the schools or people that are talking to the schools outright. I hate to say lie all the time, but I don't know when you're intentionally misrepresenting something. I think that's a lie.
Yeah,
But what
misleading.
they're sure. So what they're saying to people, they're scaring them to say all of the money that is currently being raised in property tax for schools that could go away. Now, I ask you, how could that go away when in the Constitution this measure says the state must replace every single dollar of it? So,
Right,
by the very nature of what's in the measure, it cannot go away. It's
yeah,
guaranteed to never
right,
go away.
right.
So that's false. And then, Jeff, what you alluded to, some of the legislators are saying, well, listen, if this passes, then we're going to take other funding away from locals. Eh, Now, I think that is just
It's a lie.
dastardly.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
I mean, that's truly so. And again, that goes to a Facebook Live I did. So you've got 750 million to $1 billion that goes to corporate welfare and subsidies.
Mm,
You're not
wow.
going to cut any of that to replace the
Right.
property tax. Instead of giving handouts to private big business, you're going to cut funding to locals?
And
Is that really the choice you're going to make?
that would almost do it right there if they just
Oh yeah,
cut that out because
Just the one thing.
without
Yep.
cutting one without messing with any services, even if you think that some services should go away, it's just not going to
But
happen with
I
this
think it's
measure.
interesting. The whole world is opposed to big government, excuse me, big business and big business getting subsidies. And here North Dakota is giving
You would
big
you would think the
big business.
Democrats would be all over this
Yes.
because let's get rid of that corporate
Yep.
yeah.
welfare.
But
That's
Now,
the
it
one
seems
thing the
like the
Democrats have over the Republicans is the Republicans, for whatever reason, just love giving money to private businesses.
yeah,
And Democrats allegedly hate it. And you'd think that they would be calling them out. And it's interesting too. It's in our Constitution, not to get in the weeds, but it's in our Constitution that the state government cannot gift or give money or loan money
hmm,
or take equity positions in any private business.
well, isn't that
it
But we do it
interesting?
all
so
the time.
so
Yeah.
yeah, define, because when we say corporate welfare or cronyism, that's sort
Yeah.
of an inside language. You gave a good example one
So
time of, yeah, what is
yeah,
corporate
so corporate
welfare?
welfare. Let's talk. There's a million examples. Um, $26 million is going to a drone company in Grand Forks. Now, the idea is that the supermajority of Republicans in the legislature said this is a great way to spend taxpayer dollars because if we bring them into the state, then that's going to bring more business into the state, and it's going to
Mhm.
have a cyclical effect. And what they fail to recognize is that leaving that money in taxpayers' pockets would also have a positive effect on the state, on the community. And the company with drones would probably be coming to North Dakota anyway.
Anyway,
We're just trying to entice them further. Another example, $125 million for a fertilizer plant. Now, as you know, the that $125 million was sort of earmarked behind the scenes for one or possibly two private companies. And we know it was earmarked because if you watch the video of the legislature, they actually said it on the floor. Specific legislators did. And it was worded in such a way that the way to make fertilizer, you had to do it in a very inefficient way with electrolysis of water as opposed to a more common, less costly way of making it. And when you have that language in there, you're limiting it to your specific favored businesses. That's corporate welfare.
Okay.
And the reason that they get by with it is they say, listen, fertilizer is important. We
Mhm,
need fertilizer.
mhm.
And oh, well, yeah, I guess we do need fertilizer.
Sure.
So let's give them $125 million. And what I'm told, Jeff, we'll have to see what happens, is they're going to ask for another 125 million from the
Yeah.
legislature this coming session. So now, as I always said, and I had said on the floor of the House, if a business idea is a good idea and it's profitable, we don't need to give taxpayer dollars
Right.
to it. It can be
Right.
done by the people in that
amen.
business and other venture people. And if it is not profitable, we should never be spending taxpayer dollars on it.
And-
So that's corporate welfare. We're giving money
Okay.
to businesses with the idea that somehow it's going to help the economy more than if we just let people keep their own money.
And so you got the government picking winners.
Yes.
That's when you come up with the phrase picking
Picking
winners.
winners
And that
and
when there's a winner, there's always a loser.
forcing the
You know, the
losers.
guy down the street, the local business, he didn't get anything
Right.
to start his
Right.
business.
Yep.
Um, so, so I think we need to tell this audience that's thinking, because there's a lot of oil. We're close to oil out here. Rick, the oil money, what if it goes away?
Oh my
And, you
gosh.
know,
There's
yeah.
another intentional misrepresentation. Okay,
Yes.
what they're saying is that the oil production tax in our century code is called, they refer to it as a tax in lieu of property taxes. So they're saying, well, gosh, if there's no property tax, then you can't have in lieu of, so it's going to go away. And Ron Ness allegedly has been saying that they're going to sue. I don't know if he actually said that, but
Mm.
they're going to sue to not have to pay that oil production tax. Well, number one, the lawyers at Legislative Council already said all of the in lieu of taxes stay in place. Number two, the measure does away with valuation based tax on real or personal property. It does not technically do away with all property tax.
Mm.
Your city could say, you know what, every house has to pay $100 a year. That technically would be a tax on
I
property,
see.
even
Okay.
though even though it still fits our need for wanting to get away from valuations,
Right.
from mill levies, all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't technically get away from every conceivable method of property tax. So in lieu of property tax doesn't go away because we have gotten rid of valuation based tax. The third thing is, let's just say that some doofus actually does file a lawsuit to say, well, we shouldn't have to pay in lieu of taxes. The only reason it's called the gross production tax is called in lieu of property tax is because of those three or four words in the century code. So the legislature would just change those words, get rid of those 3 or 4 words, and it no longer applies. There are other states, several other states, I forget which is which, that have gross production tax. And I think about 3 of them do have wording in there in lieu of property tax. But others don't have any wording referring to anything in lieu of or anything property tax. So you don't need it. It's just an oil tax. That's all it is.
Okay.
So that's completely false.
But they're also referring to the idea that there might not be oil one day, which also is a lie. You know,
Well, yeah.
Well,
Here's a scoop
does it
on that.
really depend on oil, this measure? I mean, in my impression is, you know, when you put 3, $4,000 in the pockets of the people every year, that
yeah.
right there is an economic boom, and
Yeah.
that takes care of your workforce recruitment problem better and more fair.
Plus, it
So
pays off
do you,
people's debts.
you know, if the oil, let's
Right.
say in 20 years did go away, I mean, our economy is gonna be better.
Right. So yeah, I agree with
So
them. If oil went away tomorrow, this would be a lot harder. Now, I still think we can right size government and we'd have enough,
right.
but it would be a
Yes.
dramatic change. But here's the thing: we know oil's not going to go away next year or the year after. It, Harold Ham says it's going to be around 50 years. I believe him. Let's say it's around for 30 more years. The question is, what
Mhm.
do we do with this huge windfall from these wonderful natural resources over the course of the next 30 years? Because the last 15 years we've wasted. So the next 30
Mm.
years, we can continue to waste and give money as corporate welfare, or we can do something that is truly legacy for future
Mm.
generations, that is truly legendary in the sense we would be the first state with no property tax. And we create a dynamic economy because now we've incentivized young families to come to the state, which takes
Mhm.
care of workforce development. We've incentivized businesses to come to the state as the most friendly tax environment that they could possibly hope
Yeah.
for with no property tax and the lowest income tax of the states that have income tax, which takes care of economic diversification. So, in 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, when oil money does go away, we have during that time insulated ourselves. So now we are protected because, as it stands right now, when oil goes away, we are in the hurt bag because we have
Yeah.
done nothing but spend it. We go back to North Dakota of 1995 when the number one thing we worried about was out migration of
Mm.
all the people, the young people moving out of North Dakota because we didn't do anything when we had the opportunity.
Mm. You know, what you're saying, what you just said sounds very Republican to me. I mean, the Republican way is supposed to be, how do you do workforce development? How do you change the economy, improve it? You lower taxes, and it
Right.
has to be fair. And, you know,
And the
and
fairest possibility is to get rid
I
of
mean, I would
property
challenge
tax.
anybody, and I'm sure Rick would love to take this challenge. Call Rick and tell him one tax cut that would be larger and more fair than this one. And, you know, like for me, just the immorality piece is enough, but you have all these other things. So it really does come down to they're just good at articulating fear
Yeah.
and exaggeration, really. I
Right.
mean, and we're not,
There's
I don't think we're being biased in that at all. It's just,
no, no, no.
it's,
It's absolutely true. No, I mean, if you want to come up with things that you're opposed to it, number one, well, the main reasons to be opposed to it are because you like the extra money coming in and you like the spending and you believe in what government can do when they give the money out to corporate welfare type interests or special interests, lobbyists, chambers. You like what that can do.
But
That
there's
would
also
be
this
one
fear.
reason, and because the locals are effectively get it's a stealth tax when your property value goes up and you have to pay more
mhm,
tax, but your elected officials tell you that they didn't raise your taxes. There's a disconnect there, and so that's money that they don't have to sort of take responsibility
right.
for,
No
be held accountable for.
transparency.
So they like that. Now, other reasons could be if you're a local elected official. This is a big change. People are resistant to change. It might be unnerving. I would
Right,
look at it as a wonderful opportunity, but
right.
it's a big change. I admit
Sure,
that.
sure. Yeah.
Aside from big spending and not liking the idea of change, and I've had literally three elected officials, different occasions around the state, separately, tell me the number one concern they have why they're not supporting it is because it will make it easier for people to say no to a tax increase. That's their primary
I
reason.
hope
Wow.
that wasn't a Republican.
Probably
And
not.
Oh,
they're
man.
right. They're right. It will be easier for people to say no to tax increases if they don't want the services or the product that our local elected officials are saying we need the tax increase for. But that's the way it's supposed to be.
right?
That's the
Right.
way it ought to be.
Yeah.
One
So
of the
those are the
things
reasons
that
to have it.
we forget, though, is that most people, well, almost all people in North Dakota are paying this property tax, even if they don't own property.
Oh,
I
yes.
think that's
Right.
something that many of the renting type people think, I'm not paying any property tax. We have a minute. We have 30
20
seconds
seconds.
left.
Give us,
So-
Rick, would you just give everybody where to go to find more
You're
information?
you're right. By the way, the renters will be benefited. We can talk about that another time. I encourage everybody to go to endpropertytax.com. So much information there, good videos, documents, proof of how we're overspending. By the way, we need all the help we can get. If you can make a donation,
Yep.
endpropertytax.com,
Okay.
make a donation.
Make a donation, endpropertytax.com.
And vote yes on Measure 4.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Rick. We got to go. See you, everybody.